Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Stevens, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this short-term rentals webinar on Data with Destiny, Predicting the Future of Our Industry, sponsored by PriceLabs and Minute. I'm the editor of Short-Term Rentals and host for today's session. And before we begin, let's introduce our first webinar series sponsor, PriceLabs. Big thank you to PriceLabs for their support for our webinar series. And next we have our second series sponsor, Minute.
Hi there, we're Minute. We make home sharing work for everyone, hosts, guests, and communities alike. We've developed the world's first indoor and outdoor sensor built specifically for hospitality, and the only one that integrates with Airbnb. The Minute sensor monitors noise, occupancy, motion, and temperature. It's camera-free, so it protects your guest privacy. We can help you prevent parties and noise complaints, enhance guest experience, and protect your rental properties, just like a co-host would. When Minute detects noise, it notifies the host. It can also contact your guests via Airbnb messages, SMS, or an automated phone call. Similarly, you'll be the first to know when there's a risk of crowd, the AC malfunctions, or someone tries to enter your rental between bookings. And the best part is, you can install Minute yourself in minutes. That's why we're trusted by hosts and hospitality professionals in more than 100 countries. Find out more about how Minute can help you host happy at minute.com.
And a big thank you, of course, to Minute for their support too. So in terms of webinar guidelines for today, we'd ask you to please keep your sound on mute and your camera off if you're not a speaker today. All of the details will be posted in the chat by my colleagues Joe and Danny, so please do post any questions you have there yourself throughout today's session. Our discussion will last around 45 minutes before we move on to some audience questions, and finally a recording will be sent round to everyone within 48 hours of today's session. So let's introduce our fantastic speaker lineup for today, and we're going to kick off please with Fausto.
Hi, my name is Fausto. I'm in charge of strategic partnerships in PriceLabs. I've been working in the short-term rent industry for 8 years now. I started as a PriceLabs user, and then I came and worked to PriceLabs, and I'm with PriceLabs for 3 years now. I'm usually based off Portugal. Today I'm in Colombia.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much, Fausto, and delighted to have you and PriceLabs on board for today's session. Next up, we'll have Sally, please, from Key Data.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. My name is Sally Henry. I am Vice President of Business Development for Key Data in EMEA. I've been in the vacation rental industry, which I love dearly, for, gosh, over 2 decades, so every 20 years. So I'm excited to be able to share some data insights and discuss how we can use data today in the industry to help us.
Thank you very much, Sally. And next up, we have Evan, please.
Thank you, Paul. I'm very honored to be here on this panel with these esteemed colleagues of mine. I'm Evan Dolgow. I'm currently in America, and I'm the head of predictive hospitality at Aidaptive. And long story short, I'm a machine learning consultant helping vacation rental managers integrate artificial intelligence solutions, so that way they could double their revenue without having to double their team. They become more efficient and they could drive more direct bookings.
Thank you very much, Evan. And last but by no means least, we have Athene, HomeToGo.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Athena. I'm based out of Berlin, and I lead the product analytics team at HomeToGo. HomeToGo is the world's largest marketplace for vacation rentals. And a little bit about what me and my team do. I operate a team of data engineers and data analysts that is basically there to meet the needs of the data needs of our product team. And that ranges from everything from building data models and pipelines to generating reporting and creating insights on the multitude of ways in which our users are interacting with our product.
Thank you very much, Athene, and to all of our speakers today. So to add some context to today's discussion, we've covered a number of key data stories, including its partnership with AJL Atelier and Amadeus, and their sponsored content in which they explained why direct data is so powerful. Within the last 12 months, we've also seen 2 data providers acquired, Transparent by OTA Insight and AirDNA by Alpine Investors. So we'll be looking at what does this mean for the convergence of hospitality and real estate sectors. One of our sponsors, PriceLabs, closed its first financing round of $30 million last July. We'll be hearing more about PriceLabs' plans with Fausto shortly. And finally, Athene's HomeToGo has been busy with M&A activity, buying up Anivac, eDomizil GmbH and Secra, while its CEO Patrick Andre has also teased a new hyper-curated vacation rental browsing experience product launch in 2023. So we'll be getting a few more details from that during today's session. So let's kick things off and looking at how data providers and revenue management companies from all of our speakers today are innovating and offering new solutions for the market. So I'll go to you first, Fausto. I know you've also recently been promoted at PriceLabs, so congratulations on that. It puts you in a fantastic position for today's session. Could you just give us a bit of a roundup of some of the data and customization features that you're starting to launch at PriceLabs?
Yeah, so in PriceLabs, we have been developing. It's not something that comes from 1 month to the other, a lot of features or a lot of customizations. But yeah, we have been focusing a lot in the last year and a half on creating, like, we have more data. But we also feel that the normal or average user tends to have some difficulty to understand when data starts to increase. If you increase the amount of data, it's harder for them to understand, to use it. So our main focus is to give more data, more features, more customization power, but on a simple and clean UI, or on a way that very easily they can use this data to make decisions. Because sometimes the most difficult part is to create a tool that is for everyone, right? For an advanced user, for someone that is starting now. And using data starts to become very tricky as you give more information, but people tend to see the information but don't know how to use this information to make really an action on their operation in terms of property managers. At the moment, we know that there's the possibility to look at past data, future data from several sources, as well as, and we use this data both to improve our algorithms, but also for users be able to benchmark and just analyze or study a market, for example.
And this past and future data you're talking about, how does that kind of go along with the automation and the fast decision making that is crucial for PriceLabs?
So algorithms understand the market and it's like the algorithm understanding comes from the market and behavior, right? So as data availability improves, algorithms will improve. But revenue management's understanding can also lead to improved outcomes. So if revenue management is one of those fields where algorithm, automation, AI, whatever you want to call it, right? A lot of people say AI. I'm not a data person. I'm not a data scientist. So AI for me, it's a very broad meaning. I don't fully understand. I think AI can be a lot of things, right? So all of this, in terms of algorithms, all of this will help and improve. This has existed and has aided human beings in doing things better and faster for many years now, right? So our focus is not to replace a revenue management, is to give a revenue management tools for them to make decisions much faster and more focus on what is really happening on the market. Before, revenue management was very focused only on past data. It was very hard to get future data, daily future data, like every day updated or every week, etc. I think at the moment, algorithm, all this data with an algorithm can help people to improve their decision making and can improve their results as well.
And this is off the back of your PriceLabs' first outside funding round, basically, in last July. So we can touch on that a little bit later as well when we get on to some of the innovations you're starting to move on to. Thank you very much for that, Fausto. We'll turn to Sally next, because Sally, you joined Key Data back in November. I think you've been getting stuck into a lot of the event side as well lately. And you've got a fantastic background within the industry, which you can surely touch on if you'd like. Could you tell us a little bit about how Key Data is innovating and building your real-time dashboard as well, sort of in complement to PriceLabs' points?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I just want to say that to complement PriceLabs and what Fausto was saying, it's the forward-looking data, which is also invaluable, and we build out business intelligence tools. So just to explain a little bit about what Key Data does, we integrate directly with thousands of property managers globally, and we pull reservation level data and also property information twice a day. So again, to Fausto's point, having that relevant up-to-date data is vitally important today. And we display back some really highly visual KPIs in a dashboard, so that we can look at both historic data and also the forward-looking data. So property managers can see how they're performing versus last year or last month or last week, whichever metric they want to drill down into. But then they can also see how they compared, like, year on year going forward. So we integrate with over 60 PMSs globally, and a number of the large PMs directly as well. But in addition to that, we also scrape the large OTAs on a daily basis to make sure that we're capturing any rentals by owners or any PMCs that we aren't yet directly integrated with. We then train the two data sources against each other. So we take our direct source data, which we know we have at a granular level, and we train it against our scrape data to give us just the clearest data set available, because transparency in data is really important when you're making some business decisions utilising the data. So in short, not only can property managers use the Key Data dashboard to monitor their own performance on a daily basis, they have over 40 KPIs to drill down to, so all parts of the business can utilise the business intelligence tools. But then they can also benchmark their performance against the rest of the market. So they can start to understand, they might think they're trading well for the summer, but actually if they see that the rest of the market is getting a higher average daily rate, or they're pacing ahead, then they can adjust their own marketing or their own process a little bit clearer. So they can actually use data and surface data to be able to make those key decisions as they need to, rather than looking back at the end of a season and seeing what they might have left out there, or they may be able to get better occupancy or higher rates. So that's just really making data usable, visible and relevant, and that's what Key Data tries to help property managers with.
Absolutely, and some fantastic points there. You're also now, we mentioned you joined in November, and you're now starting to launch Key Data into Europe. So for our audience, this is probably quite beneficial as well. You've also got the experience in partnerships. So based on what you said there about the dashboard and the forward-looking data, how do you think this is helping Key Data make more informed decisions as a result?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much data, and I think to Fausto's point, there's a lot of data out there and it can be quite scary. So what we try and do is bring it to life and let people, different parts of the business use it as they need to. But I took a look, we have thousands of users globally that utilize the key data dashboard, and I looked at our 3 most used reports worldwide. There's one, we call it a company snapshot, and that is effectively what it is. So it's a very visual graphic. You sign on and you log on, and it says, you know, it shows you your key metrics. So your average daily rate compared to last year, your occupancy compared to last year, your RevPAR. So they're really strong indicators just to say, you know, okay, how are we performing today? How was trading yesterday? And then you can easily go and filter into any bits that you might look to be, you know, trading better or worse than you thought. So it's a very strong visual tool, one that a lot of people are using. You can get it emailed to yourself every morning if you like, or circulate it around. So it's super intuitive and it's super easy to use. And equally, we have a team of partner success managers that actually train, and they all understand revenue management well, and they train every user of key data to make sure that they are getting the most out of the dashboard and that it's set up to allow them to get, you know, those key metrics that they need within their business. So the company snapshot gives you that top line overview that allows you to start those conversations within the business and utilize your data, because it's literally bringing it in front of you. The second, and it's no great surprise, we have a benchmarking report, which effectively allows you to compare your own performance against the rest of the market. So I think no matter how large you are as a property manager, you always want to know what everyone else is doing. Are you outperforming the market? Are you underperforming the market? So the benchmarking report is one of our most used tools, so that people can understand their own performance within the marketplace. And then the last one that's utilised, and I think any property manager that may be listening will understand the importance of this, and it's called the unit leaderboard, and it effectively shows at a unit, a property level, who is performing and who's not performing. So it allows you to target any property that might be falling behind the others for whatever reason, and understand what that is, or equally look at the ones that are outperforming and seeing if there's elements that can be replicated. So as a tool for either the owner services team to stop churn or to help recruit, it saves hours and hours of time, and it's a highly visible report that can be accessed by any part of the business. So there's some really cool tools. Everyone uses us for different things, but what we try and do is take reams and reams of data and data points and resurface them so that actually people can use them to make decisions in real time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sally, for those insights, and we'll come back to you shortly as well. I'll go to Evan as well. So your business is called Aidaptive, and I believe when we were last speaking as well, you said that you've been consulting for about 1.5 years. Could you just sort of give us a bit of a snapshot of what exactly Aidaptive is doing, and maybe some of the types of clients that you're working with?
Absolutely. And yes, I've been consulting VRMs with machine learning solutions for the last 1.5 years. I've spoken to over 100 where I took a peek under the hood, so I have an idea of how to start doing this. But Aidaptive is essentially delivering that OTA experience, that Amazon experience that we've been trained to expect. For example, when we go on social media curates all the content to us. When we go on Amazon, they show us products we like based off our intent, affinity, and purchasing power. And that's why they're so successful. And that's why the OTAs are dominating, because anyone that lands on their website, anyone that gets into their booking funnel, they do such a good job at personalizing that they can convert them at a higher rate. So Aidaptive takes all those great things and gives that to the little guys by essentially personalizing direct booking websites, personalizing marketing communication, and everything in between. So the idea is, how do you take this big technology and empower the smaller players with it, so that way they could swing the pendulum back into their hands, drive more direct bookings, and be long-term and have long-term autonomy?
I mean, I think this topic was almost made for you, talking about predictive hospitality as well, and you've also had the benefit of hearing from our 2 speakers already. How effectively do you think the industry is actually dealing with data? I'm no data expert, but I listen to a lot of experts talk about it. So what's your perception of the current landscape?
Yes, so I've spoken at several conferences, and I think it's important to distinguish Europeans and Americans. Europeans are significantly further ahead than us American cowboys. And I think a lot of it comes from the collaboration that the Europeans have, and my American counterparts need to learn from that. But in reality, as a whole, not good. this is the hospitality industry. And I think only recently are we realizing that direct bookings are a form of e-commerce. Instead of the package arriving at your front door, the guest arrives, but the process to purchasing is the same. You go to the website, click some pretty photos, and you press buy. But the reason that's important is that that actually cultivates something a little different than key data and PriceLabs. And I have full faith that all of these data aggregators are going to do an excellent job of capturing the trends. But what Aidaptive is capturing is the intent data of that specific guest. Similar to when you go on Amazon and you're looking for something, you have an intention in mind. You're looking for tissues, you're looking for something specific. But how do you essentially personalize that experience and show them the best options so maybe they spend a little more? And the more they engage, and again, it takes 6 to 8 times for someone to come back to your website and finally press book. How do you keep learning about them every time they come back? So that way, the next time they come back, you can continue improving the experience. So long story short, the industry has a long way to go in their data acumen. And I think it comes down to just accepting that humans are innately not good at data. We can only handle a finite amount. And eventually, we're going to have to use AI and these solutions to make sense of things. So I know people are very scared that AI is taking over. But in reality, I believe that humans that use AI will replace humans that don't use AI because they'll be that much more powerful in their ability to handle mass data sets.
Thank you, Evan. I'm looking forward to sort of delving into a little bit more of that nitty gritty of the data and AI with you a little later. We'll turn to Athena next as well, because HomeToGo is a company that we know very well. You talk about it being sort of a curated marketplace of what I think they call it the world's largest selection of vacation rentals. It was only about a year and a half ago that you were going public as well. I'm really interested to know actually how HomeToGo is now starting to develop and innovate within its tech stack specifically.
Yeah, so data-driven decision-making is very much the crux of everything every team does here at HomeToGo. We of course, have a wealth of data on all of our users, and what we're trying to do basically is to try to derive as much insight from that as efficiently as possible. This means that a core focus of the data team is to make sure that our tech stack is well equipped with the tools needed to do that. So kind of in addition to our standard BI tools for reporting, we're also, of course, heavily leveraging a lot of machine learning based solutions for tasks like, for example, anomaly detection. So having tools that allow us to basically quickly surface any step changes in KPIs and, in given segments and given markets that allow us to kind of react to that quickly rather than kind of waiting for a problem to get bigger and then only then see it. And also for aspects like, root cause analysis. So if, for example, we see, we want to understand why metric XYZ changed from one day to the next, having tools like, for example, CISU, a decision intelligence tool, is there to kind of help us, we feed in a set of dimensions, then it tells us basically, out of these 5 segments, what actually caused this change that we're seeing. So, really reducing the time we're spending manually slicing and dicing. And what I would say kind of the common thread between these solutions is that I think they're all quite accessible. They're all very user friendly, right? So one doesn't need to have this really technical profile to be able to get the full potential out of these tools. And that's really something we aim for in our data team, is to look for solutions that are very self-service, because kind of our philosophy is that we as analytics don't want to be the bottleneck between the business and the data, right? So we want people to kind of be able to get their hands dirty and kind of interact with themselves, and also kind of really interact with things as quickly as possible, just because, without data, we're kind of flying blind, and we want to make sure that we're making informed decisions. So having the right tooling, I think, is really important in kind of increasing adoption and also kind of increasing the velocity at which we can interact with data. Just because without all that manual slicing and dicing things, we just get to things a whole lot faster with the right tooling.
Yeah. What how do you think it depends with you're talking? I'm someone who doesn't have too much of a technical profile, so I'm learning from you as I'm going along. But when we talk about the right tooling, and you as a product and analytics team lead as well, what do you think this actually means? What are the extra benefits from that?
Right. So I think one important thing to note is that we try to look for tools that fit the use case. So rather than having kind of, a one size fits all jack of all trades thing that does, your BI and then your root cause analysis and all that, we try to find one solution that does each thing kind of really well. So we're also reducing kind of our dependencies later on in the future. And kind of in looking for that, again, like a key aspect there is making sure things are user friendly, that you don't need to be be able to write a really, really advanced SQL to be able to kind of, properly query a tool, or, you don't need to kind of of navigate the super complex UI. We want things that are user-friendly, that do not, take kind of a PhD to understand, that everyone can basically kind of adopt really quickly, and with, of course, the right support from analytics if needed, kind of start engaging with directly to, again, kind of get the data as quickly as possible, because, people are looking at this stuff every day, and there's only so many people on the data team that are there to kind of support. So trying to kind of like democratize data, if you want to put it that way, perhaps.
Thank you very much for that. Those insights, Athena. We'll come back to you shortly as well. Sally, as well, kind of looking at the wider industry, and you say that key data is aggregating and working with a lot of property managers. How are these property managers using tools like Athena was just saying, or reports within the key data dashboard?
Yeah, before we do, I just need to the one point of getting down and dirty with the data. I love that. So but yeah, listen, as we say, there's an awful lot of data, and our property managers use it in a lot of different ways. So if you look at it from a marketing department's perspective, they can utilize the data to understand where their customers are coming from, so the feeder markets, and also the booking windows, and they can use it to build their marketing campaigns to understand who should they target at the right time with what message, depending on that traveller behaviour. And then if you move over to like the revenue management side, clearly critical. They utilise the data, the pacing, and they'll make their pricing adjustments accordingly, often in conjunction with a pure revenue management tool as well, such as PriceLabs. So it just brings that visibility with the business intelligence tools for that department. And then again, as I touched on, the owner relations team, and having that ability to understand the performance at a unit level, or should they field a call from an owner who wants to understand exactly what's going on, or maybe their interpretation of the previous season is not quite as it was, for example, or what their friend down the road is doing. So it just gives them some very professional tools to hand without having to go and find and dig away at the data. And then also looking at owner recruitment to understand, where do you want to expand your portfolio? You can build comp sets to understand how your competition are performing. Are they selling well? Are they not selling well? Is that somewhere you should be looking? Is that some owners you should be targeting? And then it drills right down to, the crux of your business. So, in the operations world, you need to understand if length of stay is contracting. Then you need to understand what impact might that have on your cleaning schedule, or if bookings are coming much shorter, are you set up and geared to welcome the guest and to have the property cleaned? So data is there, and it's to be utilised, and it's making sure all different areas of the business have access to that data quickly. So that's within the property manager's world. There's a wealth of tools, but then the data is also used much wider. So destinations and tourist boards utilize our data a lot, because historically we used to only capture guest stays by hotel nights, but obviously the market is much wider. So now we can provide real visitor numbers for a tourist destination, which helps them with some of their their economic performance, but then also understanding traveller volumes, and predicting some of the inbound traffic that's coming through. And some even extend to certain regions if they are heavily reliant on vacation rentals, and it will go out to even restaurants when they're planning to their resource and their staff. So effectively it's this forward-looking data which is giving people the ability to plan. And then the other side is the investment companies. So obviously our data can predict, or it can share exactly what sort of revenue might come in. So it might help someone decide on which market to invest in or not to invest in, because we can help with the rental projections for different areas. So there's lots of different industries can utilise the data, specifically designed for property managers, but the data output from the other side helps tourist boards and investment facilities alike.
And these investment firms as well, I think that's a really interesting point to touch on. But is this for types of funding rounds where people are raising money for their business? Or are we looking at companies that are exploring M&A as well, and which companies to target, do you think?
Yeah, it's all of them, to be fair, Paul. So sometimes because it's got forward-looking data, It gives a really clear view of how it's how the market is looking. But equally, you know, the real estate sector uses it as well for just where to invest in property, versus the M&A, and also other businesses just trying to understand which markets to target or not, where they believe the best return will be. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Sally. Back to you, Athena, as well. Some really fascinating points you brought up before, and based on what Sally's saying as well. When we look at user behavior as well, like how are companies, maybe like HomeToGo or some of the companies you're working with as well, how are they looking to refine their products when it comes to data?
Yes, so I think better understanding user behavior and how they, you know, like their typical patterns of searching and booking is, you know, pretty much what informs, you know, the development of our product going forward, right? And you know, like the goal of the product team is basically to make sure the experience of the user on site is as seamless and as joyful as possible. And kind of where my team then comes into product analytics is kind of identifying what the friction points are that users are experiencing on site. Like where are they running into difficulties in finding their perfect vacation rental? And the way we've kind of traditionally conceptualized this is we thought about the user journey in kind of a, you know, linear funnel, right? So first they land on site, then they search, then they click, then they book. And I mean, kind of thinking of things in this way has gotten us a long way, to be fair. So like when you look at kind of the drop-off rates between each stage, you know, where are we losing users between searching and clicking? Kind of honing in there has helped us kind of identify areas that need optimization. But the truth of the matter is that, you know, users do not behave always in this nice, predictable, linear way, right? So they're not always just searching, clicking, booking, but they're searching, they're clicking a couple times on some offers, they search again, they click again, then maybe they leave, they come back a couple days later, and then finally they book. So this, I mean, we know they're doing that, right? The data tells us that. And, you know, I think in kind of, you know, overlooking this, these kind of non-linearities, these kind of back and forth patterns in which users are searching and booking, we're losing out on a whole lot of insight on how we can make our product better, just because, you know, we're not necessarily thinking about, you know, like this is the way the people are actually searching and booking, right? So what, you know, we're trying to do right now, what we're in the early stages of doing is trying to develop a model that more holistically captures this user journey, right? So that better kind of that shows these non-linearities and allow us to basically see kind of where in these zigzag patterns people are actually dropping off, because that's ultimately what's going to allow us to build a better product.
And that's really good. And the point as well with Sally, we're sort of touching on the supply and demand background as well. But how do you think businesses are examining this, maybe for each location, and using insights from that?
Yes, I mean, I think generally speaking, when you think about supply, we're thinking in terms of inventory coverage, right? And then demand in terms of how many people are looking at that. So, I mean, I think high level, we have looked at this in the past, where we looked at things like, you know, on the demand side, like the volume of Google searches to indicate for a given location how many people are kind of looking for these. And then, of course, inventory coverage is pretty easy to match. So if you do that for each location you're active in, you can kind of develop this kind of heat map of sorts in terms of like where kind of demand is strong and where inventory coverage is strong. And then basically kind of based on those, identify locations where you might want to hone in on one or the other, essentially. So, you know, the areas where demand is super strong, you probably want to focus more on your inventory there. Whereas where, you know, where there's a lot of good quality inventory, it probably makes sense to step up marketing in those areas, for example. So kind of matching those two, I think, is pretty important.
Thank you very much, Athena, there. Evan, as well, we'll come back to you as well, because when we spoke before, you mentioned something called guest intent data. Now, I'm not sure if this is like a commonly used phrase, or whether our audience will be familiar with it already, or maybe they are. But could you maybe just explain a little bit about what this actually is when we're looking forward with data, and maybe how this differs from some of the other terms and
Sure.
vocabulary that we're hearing?
Yeah, so guest intent or customer intent in e-commerce is a very known term in e-commerce, but in hospitality, I don't think anyone has ever heard of it. I think I'm the only one who's been saying it. But when you think about data and the aggregators, they're going after big data, mass data. They're putting it together, they're mangling it, and they're packaging it in a way that's useful to make decisions about your business. Guest intent data is specific to an individual guest. So for example, Paul, if you land on a website and you start clicking around, we're going to learn about what are your preferences, what's your purchasing power, what are you looking for? So that's your specific
intent. I'm not sure you want to know, to be honest. But
maybe I don't, but the idea is that an OTA will take that data and then spoon feed you exactly what you want to see. And the more you engage, the more it learns and the better accuracy it gets with its recommendations.
And when it comes to that specific data and purchasing power, all of this, what are property managers actually able to grab from this data and learn to make more informed decisions for their businesses?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Paul. I'm not sure you meant for it to be so loaded, but I think the idea with data is that it's not something that you're just supposed to constantly be putting out fires with. I think a lot of professionals in the industry are always looking at these spreadsheets, just mangling in, they're fighting in, they're nonstop putting out fires. So the idea is, how do you have some things on autopilot where you set it and forget it? For example, an always adapting website to each user. For example, booking.com does like 1 million A/B tests a month. So every one of us, if we go on booking.com, the search will be in a different location. The recommendations will be in a different location. From the way Athena's nodding, it sounds like HomeToGo is doing the same thing. So the idea is how do you start to have some passive data cultivation methods and deployment with personalization? But then it comes down to marketing, because I think now more than ever, the revenue management team is closer to the marketing team in ways we've never seen before, because you can't just keep increasing and decreasing properties 1% to drive revenue. We got to find other ways to create added value. So I think for the marketing team, another example is how do you take the existing customers you have and drive repeat direct bookings without fatiguing your entire database? So let's say you have a property that needs a boost. Instead of sending that to all 50,000 of your previous guests who don't want to see it, how do you segment out the appropriate guest for that property and only show it to them? So it's getting more precise with your targeting, and it's just increasing all aspects of the business by using that intent data and matching it with the properties that they need to see.
Thank you for that, Evan. We have had a question. So Ahmed in the chat, if Evan, if you want to go back and answer that, perhaps you already have with your answer, but I'll leave you to that, and we can come back to that later as well. A reminder to everyone as well tuning in, if you've got any questions you'd like to ask of our panelists, then please do pop them in the chat, and we will have a bit of time at the end to do that. Fausto, I'm really interested. Sorry, no, please.
Can I add something to what Evan said that I think it's very interesting? I think people like a real life example. I'm a former revenue manager, and for example, in the company where I was working, we will track all the checkout days for each repeated guest. We had some guests that repeatedly check out on Sundays, for example. We started to do some email campaigns only for those guests, offering a 50% discount for an extension to Monday, because we didn't want cleanings on Sundays or check-ins on Sundays, for example. This is a very simple way how to segment something on the behavior of one of your guests.
Absolutely, and you come perfectly into my next question as well there, Fausto. When looking at some of the wider consumer trends and booking behavior, what do you see as some of the key takeaways that our audience should be getting out of this?
I think first of all, like in terms of, and I will focus on property management and revenue managers, right? I think I remember my first class of my first revenue management course. The first thing the teacher said is, others can trust in God, we have to trust in numbers. So we cannot make decisions based on intuition. We have to make decisions based on numbers. I think one of the main mistakes is people think that doing revenue management is something that they need to start on a very advanced pro with a lot of data set, with a lot of it. You don't need to. You have to adapt to your own reality. And so start with like the basic KPI, start with basic strategy, start by tracking basic data. If you don't want to use a lot of tools, if you don't want to use a lot of data, you can still do it by doing something basic. And of course, trust AI or tools or whatever you want to call it, but use tools. Don't think that starting to use a tool like PriceLabs or Key Data or hiring someone like Evan to do your strategy or helping you, don't think that you need to do this when you are with 1,000 properties or 500 properties. You should start think about your strategy and when you're small, because it's much harder to do it when you are a big company. Moving something, implementing something is much harder. So you can start with simple steps. Not everyone has to do everything the same way, but use your data wisely. It doesn't matter the amount of data, but the data that you have, use it. And if you can have more, use it as well. Don't burn all the chips you have in your head trying to understand and do a lot of things. Main mistake, do a lot of changes, because I see data today, then I see new data tomorrow and new data, and I'm always making changes. You will never know if it's working or not, your strategy. Like, you have to use data wisely, make a change, and wait to understand if it's working or not, and then you can change it if it's not working, or improve what is working. But I think data get people a little bit scary, and then people try to make a decision based on data. They don't understand it. They go to panic mode. They start to change and change and change and change, and then they have the idea that the data is not correct. But in reality, it's just we are not using data wisely. So that's why I think everyone should use tools to help them with data. It doesn't matter which tool, then the people can adapt their own operation.
And looking at specific markets as well, like how would you perhaps compare like the general pacing that you're seeing in the States, for example, compared to Europe or other markets that you operate in?
Well, what we saw, for example, we were trying to understand, and we saw some general behavior. I think it's very hard when we talk about Europe or the US in total about like reality, because it depends. It's very local, right? But in general, pacing in the US is slower than last year, and in general, pacing in Europe, it's much higher than last year. It's better. For example, traditional vacation rental markets saw an incredible surge in 2021 and 2022, but 2023, it's a little bit different. Sea, mountain, rural locations still thrive, but travels are more price sensitive. It's what we feel that is happening. Cities are experiencing a resurgence in demand, but the pace of recovery varies greatly between markets and seasons. For instance, in 2023, most European cities are surpassing their 2022 levels. Some that I know, some countries specifically, are even surpassing 2019 levels, pre-COVID. For example, south of Europe, I will not say some countries, I will say some destinations in some countries are surpassing 2019 levels. In response to these shifts, property managers and hosts comparative data to reduce uncertainty for the urban and non-urban short-term rental businesses. I can give you some examples what usually happens. For example, when a market slows down, usually last-minute trends tend to increase. It's something that happens, right? And tends to happen more online and with instant booking when markets are slower. When there's a lot of demand or high seasons are very strong, people usually tend to book with a larger booking window, there's more repeat clients. People tend to try to negotiate a little bit. And in a lot of markets, also very different urban from traditional vacation rentals, there's some destinations that instant booking, the percentage is not as big as others, right? I think urban is much bigger than traditional vacation rental markets. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fausto. And Athene, at HomeToGo, you've got, I think, so many key consumer trends that you can probably delve into as well. Do you want to pick out some of the key ones that you're noticing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I can give a couple of highlights. I mean, I think kind of the big one that we've been noticing is that value for money is kind of top of mind right now for a lot of consumers. So I think HomeToGo has done some surveys on this, and I think something like 2/3 of respondents have indicated that price is kind of the deciding factor in what they're going to book accommodation wise. So, seeing a lot of customers looking to book on a budget these days. I think something else worth noting is that we've been also seeing kind of a rise in demand for travel during the shoulder seasons. So more and more customers are also kind of traveling during the kind of off, less on peak, so fall and spring months, as they're realizing, it's less crowded than during the summer, but also, again, tying into the value for money point, it's also a lot cheaper. And also maybe kind of a fun one to end on. We're also seeing a lot more customers being influenced by TV shows and movies in terms of the destinations they want to go to. So we've done some analyses on these, and we've also seen that in kind of the immediate aftermath of the releases of certain shows and movies, we've seen a spike in search demand for the locations they were shot in. So I think probably something like 90% of the people on this call have been watching The White Lotus. So we really did also see a big spike in searches for Sicily after season 2 came out. So something that we've been seeing as well.
That is fantastic. I know, I don't know if my colleague Eloise, who's the editor of our boutique hotel news website, I remember back in December when we were doing our predictions pieces for the year ahead, she said that this was going to be a key trend, and she was getting this information from Tara Colpitts, I believe her name is, from Expedia Group. I don't know if we can get that, if my team in the back end can get that into the chat, but it's a well worth reading, so definitely aligns there with what you're saying, Athena. Sally, as well, I know that you've got a slide as well that you'd like to put, that you've been able to put together for us. So
yeah,
we can we can pull this up.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of data, so I thought it was easy just to pop it on a slide for everyone to see, but it echoes what Fausto, and we've said, it's effectively we're seeing pace slow down, and to Fausto's point, it's very difficult to do the globe, right, because there's so many different nuances between. But just looking really quickly, just taking it, we're almost at the end of Q1, so that's a little easier to do. So in US we can see the average daily rate, the ADR for the US generally, globally across, was slightly up, whereas you can see in Europe it was up 15% on Q1 arrivals, and the UK even better, drilling down at plus 20%. So that's almost, we're almost done, 2-3 more weeks of Q1, and we can draw a line under that. But then look at the occupancy. So the daily rate was up, but the occupancy is still down. And I know we've still got a couple of weeks to go, but in the US, it's 43% versus that 50%. Europe, it's not down quite as much, 37 versus 42, and very similar in the UK. So that's just interesting to see how Q1 started, off the back of a really strong 2022 for almost the global market. So we're looking ahead at summer because that's on everyone's radar. So the US, we have seen a softening in demand. It's currently down 5% for summer occupancy, and for summer we mean June, July, and August arrivals. That's how we've determined summer in these data stats. And in Europe's almost there, and UK is slightly up. So we're looking pretty much like for like compared to last year as it currently stands. And that's summer RevPAR. So by RevPAR, it's where we're looking at occupancy and the ADR, and we're looking at available units. So we're getting a real strong metric. And again, you'll see that we are down in the US of A, which I know, Fausto, you also alluded to, but we're slightly ahead in Europe. So things are looking a little bit more positive in Europe compared to the US at the moment. But a large factor of this is supply. So I think there's an awful lot of note on our occupancies down, but actually supply is up, which means that individual occupancy rates might be down a little, but as a market, they are still strong. So you'll see in the US, and the reason I pulled out the summer to summer is because we always see more supply come in the summer and then drop off in the winter. So looking at May to September last summer, you saw that actually 17% more supply came into the US market, which is huge. In Europe, it was a little flatter, 6% and 4%. So still good growth, but nothing like the boom that we saw in the US. But I think now what we're seeing in the US is a falling away of market performance because we had that big, strong surge of supply. Interesting length of stay. Length of stay is getting a little shorter. There's been a lot of narrative around it. Obviously, the economic factors mean that some people will effectively be not maybe staying for quite as long. They're still going away, but they're not necessarily staying for as long or in quite as an expensive property. We've seen the same in Europe, but then the UK, we've actually seen a lengthening of length of stay, albeit the average length of stay is quite a lot shorter than the rest of Europe. And the other one to keep an eye on is booking window. So again, people are booking slightly further out. So I think we're not necessarily going to say we are nailed on for those late last minute bookings necessarily, as we've seen the heat of some of the markets in previously. But the one good thing that's there is that in all markets, summer prices for 2023 are pacing significantly ahead. So that's really good news. Like, we've managed to hold the rates strong. But then we're starting to see it softening in the US, and prices will come down accordingly. So as we get closer to the summer, you know, hopefully we can maintain those high ADRs, but equally, if we want to get the occupancy up, we might have to see those rates soften. And equally, if we do get shorter length of stays, I think as property manager, you've got to start thinking about those trap nights, or the effect it might have on your operations and your cleaners. So, you know, look at the data and the forward planning data, and use it wisely to make sure you maximise out the season.
Excellent. Some really encouraging indicators there for the rest of the year, particularly the summer. And we've got Sally's details as well in the chat as well, if anyone wants to follow up and talk more about those statistics afterwards as well. Thank you very much, Sally. My next question, I mean, Evan, you said before my last question was loaded. I'm interested to see how you're going to answer this one. But, you know, we've talked about, you know, several of the companies on this panel as well. They are relying on that data, for example. So do you see perhaps big tech or OTAs, are they not going to be sharing so much data moving forward, or are they going to be sharing as much? Are there any other factors we should be aware of in play?
Paul, if I can answer yours with a question, if you had a mountain of gold, would you give all of it away for free to us?
Is that a...
So that's how I see it. I see data as gold. There's a reason big tech isn't playing nice with each other. They're especially not playing nice with us. We've been on the freemium model for a long time now, where everything's free to use, but we're already seeing Airbnb talking about boosting your listings with sponsorships and things like that. So I have a feeling that direct bookings are going to be a priority. But the reality is that direct bookings are already difficult. But in 2024, it's going to get much more difficult because GDPR is coming to America. Big tech isn't sharing data anymore. Regulation is everywhere, and just so many other reasons. So long story short, if I was an OTA, I would definitely not share it. And let this be a call for urgency that if you want to drive direct bookings in the long run, you better start yesterday.
Some good points there. I should actually add that my team, big thank you to them. They posted that boutique hotel news predictions article from December. Some of the trends there that Athene was mentioning, and then her last section there. Kath, we can get those details over to you. We can let you follow up with Sally afterwards as well. I'm interested, within the last couple of minutes we've got left, I'm interested from all of you and some of the innovations that you see moving forward as well. So Fausto, of course, PriceLabs has now got this $30 million funding coming into it. So what do you maybe see as some of the opportunities moving forward, and the type of data that's going to be useful for professionals within the industry?
So in my personal opinion, I think at least for short-term rentals, reality is still very local. It depends a lot on segmentation, location. So hyper-local data will still be a very important focus for us. Because at the end, we have different customers, different locations, different segments, different way of operating. So that's why, for example, in events, when people share like Europe data or Spain data or Italy data, it's very, very dangerous, because maybe half of the Spanish there are some locations that they see and they say, that's not true, like that's not my data, right? So I think hyperlocal data will still be a very big focus. Then one thing that we gave the first step, but it's still hard, it's being able to automate and change your minimum stay strategy based on market behavior. We gave a first step on giving a recommendation, like a minimum stay strategy recommendation, but being able to update it automatically based on market behavior, it's still something that for the future, I think it's going to be important, because I think length of stay has a bigger impact than people think on their operation. Automated positioning of the property. So basically, you know that these dynamic pricing tools usually work with the base price, but there's something, even with UI, machine learning, something very, very difficult, that is how to filter quality. How will we filter quality when we are looking at such an amount of data, right? Of course, we can use star rating and reviews and this, but it's still like, it's hard to know if the mattress is good, if the shower is good, etc., the decoration, these kind of things. I think a better understanding of AI. What is AI? I think companies like Even and etc. I think even I that work in the industry, AI for me, it's, if you tell me, explain what AI is, I'm not sure, because I think there's a lot of segmentation inside AI, and we always say AI. And okay, but what, like, I imagine there's different levels of AI, you can use it in a different way, different segmentation. And then a couple more to end. Something that we noticed during COVID or during some special events, what to do when you are recommending prices to someone, what to do when a new event happens that never happened before, in a location that never happened before. You can still react to demand, but it's still hard to understand what can be like the impact that it will have if it never happened before. So if tomorrow there's like World Cup in Qatar, right? No one knew exactly what was going to happen. And then Qatar didn't have a lot of accommodation. So people were still accommodating in Dubai and traveling to Qatar. So if maybe like 1 year before, no one thought that Dubai will see a big increase in accommodation and people will fly between Qatar. I don't know, like, so this kind of, and then understanding which new data adds value to the data set, because there's so much data now. Like if you start to, okay, let's just add, at some point, it's just very complicated to work all that data. So which, at least for us, right, which data adds value to the data set? Should we add everything? Should we filter it? How should we filter it? So I think there's some questions that, of course, this is connected with AI, with machine learning, all of that, right? But I think this is the biggest focus for PriceLabs, yeah.
Thank you, Fausto. And just for my final question as well. So Evan, Fausto talks there about AI and filtering quality. When it comes to ChatGPT and machine learning and AI, etc., how do you think this is going to be used maybe to deploy data more efficiently going forward?
Yes, and let me preface this with that not all AI is created equally. For AI, so what is AI? If I had to bundle it up, which is very difficult to do, takes a ton of data, draws meaningful connections, and then it has an output. So the idea is that in order for that to be effective, you have to have tons and tons of data. And this is the part that's hurting me, because there are so many vendors out there saying, hey, use our AI solutions, AI this, automate that. They're just throwing around the word. It's not even AI. So I think the best way to, I guess, do that due diligence is by maybe checking out their LinkedIn and looking at their pedigree. And then once you're able to see, do you have that data so that you can deploy AI, then you can start doing research. But I think for now, it should be a priority in the industry to just focus on best practices in e-commerce, because that's the best way to cultivate data passively. So the more conversions you get on your website, the more engagement you have, that's all on your Google Analytics, and that data can later be used to fuel AI solutions. So if I had to give a piece of advice, it's just follow some of the best practices in e-commerce, look at Amazon, look at the OTAs, see what they're doing. Do not reinvent the wheel, just copy and paste, because they spend billions of dollars figuring it out for us.
They basically don't reinvent the wheel.
Do not.
When it comes to that's some fantastic advice, and hopefully it's given our attendees today lots to go away with. I did want to probably touch on more things with Sally and Athene. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but Athene, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about modes and some of the innovations that HomeToGo is bringing on, and Sally equally. Fantastic job you're doing at Key Data, and looking forward to seeing and hearing more about what you're doing in the market as well this year. Big thank you to all of our contributors today, to Fausto, to Sally, to Evan and Athene. We've just a couple of slides to run through very, very quickly before we head off for the rest of our day. So we're back for our next short-term rentals webinar, which is our Dragon's Den Shark Tank style webinar. It's called Pitch to Pool. We've done a couple of these already, where a couple of startups will be pitching for potential investment. That's on Tuesday, the 4th of April at 4 p.m. BST, and the sign-up link is in the chat now. Would thoroughly recommend signing up for that. You now have just over 30 hours, or 31 hours to be precise, to submit your entries for our annual Shorties Awards dubbed the Oscars of the short-term vacation rental industry. The deadline is closing tomorrow at 23:59 GMT, so that's Wednesday, 15th March. There is no cost to enter, and no limit as well on the number of categories you can submit for our dedicated entries platform. That will be in the chat as well. Would hope that all of our companies represented here as well on the session will be entering as well too. Information on the categories, entry process, tickets, everything you need will be posted in the chat as well. For opportunities to work with us, please do contact my colleagues Katie and Steph on screen, or their details are on screen for you now. Big thank you again to PriceLabs, particularly to Fausto for coming on and contributing to today's session, and to Minute for sponsoring our webinar today. We are just going to keep the session open for another 2 minutes as well. So if anyone wants to jot down any key details from the chat, connect with our speakers, you can do that now. Do contact us via our various channels. You can see them on the screen now. Big thank you once again to all of our speakers and to all of you, of course, for tuning in. And we'll see you again very soon. Thank you very much, everyone.